$50,000. That was the exact price to play a fake husband for 24 hours. For a single father drowning in his daughter's medical debt, it felt like salvation. He never suspected his temporary bride was his own ruthless billionaire boss, or that their charade would risk absolutely everything. Liam Hayes stared at the stack of envelopes on his cramped kitchen counter, the red past due stamps bleeding through the thin paper like fresh wounds. Outside his tiny apartment window, the relentless rain of the city mirrored the sinking feeling in his chest. In the next room, the soft, rhythmic hum of a medical humidifier was the only sound keeping him tethered to reality. His 7-year-old daughter, Chloe, was asleep. 2 months ago, a severe respiratory infection had nearly taken her from him. She had survived, but the aftermath had left them drowning. The specialized treatments, the out-of-network specialists, the medication, it was a tidal wave of debt that his mid-level salary as a data compliance analyst simply couldn't cover. Liam worked for Sterling Roads Holdings, a massive, faceless conglomerate that owned everything from commercial real estate to global shipping logistics. He was employee number 40,921. He worked 60 hours a week, analyzing risk assessment spreadsheets on the 14th floor of a glass monolith. Above him, in the penthouse suites, executives made decisions that shifted the global economy. Down in the trenches, Liam was just trying to keep the lights on and pay the $48,000 he owed the hospital before they sent his accounts to aggressive collection agencies. He rubbed his exhausted eyes and picked up his phone. He had one connection to the world of the ultra-rich, an old college friend named True. True ran a boutique, highly discreet concierge service for the 1%. Over the years, Liam had occasionally driven luxury cars or worked high-end security for True to make extra cash. But tonight, he wasn't looking for a driving gig. He was looking for a miracle. "True," Liam said, when the line clicked open. "I need a job. Anything. I don't care what it is. I need 50 grand, and I need it fast." There was a long pause on the other end. "Liam, 50 grand isn't a weekend driving gig. That's cartel money, or it's ND as signed in blood money." "I'll sign whatever they want," Liam replied, his voice hard, desperate. "Chloe's final notice came today. If I don't pay by the end of the month, they garnish my wages. If they do that, I lose the apartment. Please." True sighed, a heavy, scraping sound over the receiver. "There is one thing. It came across my desk an hour ago. It's highly unorthodox. A top-tier client, entirely anonymous, needs a proxy for a weekend." "A proxy?" "A husband," True corrected. "A husband for a day. There is a massive family estate gathering happening in Newport, Rhode Island this weekend. The client needs to present a picture-perfect, stable, personal life to secure a family inheritance and a board vote. Her team contacted me looking for someone clean-cut, intelligent, and capable of blending in with old money. No actors. They're too recognizable and too prone to blackmail. They want a nobody, a ghost." "And it pays 50,000, Liam asked, his heart hammering against his ribs. 50 up front, wired to an offshore escrow, released to you Sunday night upon completion," True said. "But Liam, listen to me. These people do not play games. You sign a non-disclosure agreement that essentially signs away your firstborn if you breathe a word of this to anyone. You are not to contact the client afterward. You do exactly what she says. You smile for the patriarch of the family, and you leave." Liam looked through the cracked door of Chloe's bedroom. He saw the rise and fall of her small chest, the stuffed bear tucked under her arm. He didn't even hesitate. "Send me the paperwork." 48 hours later, Liam found himself sitting in the back of a blacked-out Mercedes Maybach, speeding up the Atlantic coast. The clothes he wore, a bespoke charcoal Tom Ford suit, a Patek Philippe watch, and handmade Italian leather shoes, cost more than his entire college education. The concierge team had briefed him on his new identity. He was still Liam, but instead of a data analyst drowning in medical debt, he was a successful, independent software developer who had met the client in Geneva 6 months ago. They had eloped in secret to avoid the press. He was given a thick dossier to memorize. Family tree, names of the board members attending, the layout of the estate. But strangely, the dossier did not include the name or photograph of his wife. The instructions were strict. He would meet her at the estate 10 minutes before they were to make their grand entrance. As the Maybach turned off the main highway and onto a private, crushed gravel road lined with ancient oak trees, Liam felt a cold sweat prickle the back of his neck. The gates to the estate loomed ahead, massive wrought-iron monstrosities bearing a crest he recognized instantly. A silver shield with a twin-headed falcon. Liam's breath caught in his throat. It was the corporate logo of Sterling Roads Holdings. No, he thought, panic seizing his chest. It can't be. The car rolled to a stop in front of a limestone mansion that looked more like a European palace than a summer home. A butler opened the door, and Liam stepped out, his legs feeling like lead. He was ushered through echoing grand halls, past priceless Renaissance art, and into a dark, mahogany-lined library overlooking the crashing ocean. "The young lady will be with you momentarily, sir," the butler murmured before closing the heavy double doors. Liam stood frozen by the fireplace. He worked for the Rhodes family. Specifically, he worked under the iron-fisted rule of the newly appointed acting CEO, a woman notorious on Wall Street for her absolute ruthlessness, a woman who had just ordered a 10% workforce reduction across his entire division. The brass doorknob turned. Liam braced himself. The doors parted, and in walked Victoria Rhodes. She was striking, terrifying, and utterly unmistakable. Victoria Rhodes, the 34-year-old billionaire heiress and ice queen of the corporate world, stepped into the library wearing a fitted emerald green evening gown that radiated power. Her sharp, piercing blue eyes scanned Liam from head to toe, dissecting him in less than a second. Liam's blood ran cold. If she recognized him, if she knew employee 40,921 was standing in her private family library, posing as a hired gig worker, he wouldn't just lose the $50,000. He would be fired, blacklisted, and buried under a mountain of corporate legal retaliation. He held his breath, waiting for the flash of recognition, the narrowed eyes, the immediate dismissal. Instead, Victoria checked her diamond-studded Cartier watch and let out a short, irritated sigh. "Your trues guy." "Liam, correct?" Her voice was crisp, lacking any warmth, completely transactional. He exhaled slowly. She didn't know him. To her, he was just a prop, a faceless drone among the tens of thousands who populated her skyscrapers. "Yes, Ms. Rhodes." "Call me Victoria. If you call me Ms. Rhodes out there, my grandfather will have you thrown into the Atlantic," she snapped, walking over to a silver tray and pouring herself a glass of neat bourbon. She didn't offer him one. "Did you memorize the dossier?" "Yes." "Good. Here is the reality of the situation," Victoria said, turning to face him, the crystal glass catching the firelight. "My grandfather, Winston Rhodes, is officially stepping down as chairman of the board this weekend. He holds the controlling 51% of the voting shares. By all rights, they should pass to me, the current acting CEO. But Winston is an antiquated, traditionalist dinosaur. He believes a woman cannot run an empire unless she is anchored by a stable family life. She spat the words with deep disdain. "So, you hired a husband," Liam said, keeping his voice carefully neutral. "I bought an insurance policy," she corrected sharply. "My cousin, Snow, is a vulture circling my position. He has a perfect wife, 3 perfect children, and 0 business acumen. If my grandfather senses any instability in my personal life, he will hand the shares to Snow, and Snow will bankrupt this company in 5 years. So, 6 months ago, when the pressure started, I panicked and told my grandfather I had secretly eloped with an independent tech developer. Today, I have to produce him." She walked toward Liam, stopping inches from his chest. The scent of expensive, sharp jasmine perfume hit him. "You will be charming, but not overly talkative. You adore me, but you respect my independence. You will hold my hand, you will laugh at Winston's terrible jokes, and under no circumstances will you let Snow draw you into a conversation about your fictional tech company. Understood?" "Understood," Liam said. He looked down at her. Up close, beneath the icy exterior, he could see the faint, dark circles of exhaustion under her eyes. She was fighting for her life in a different way than he was, but the desperation was remarkably similar. "Put this on," she commanded, handing him a simple, heavy platinum wedding band. Liam slid it onto his ring finger. It was cold against his skin. "Showtime," Victoria muttered, forcing a stunning, completely fabricated smile onto her face as she looped her arm through his. The grand dining room was a theatre of wealth and intimidation. A mahogany table stretched 20 feet long, set with antique silver and crystal. Seated at the head was Winston Rhodes, an 80-year-old titan with hawkish eyes and a presence that demanded total submission. Around the table sat various board members, aunts and uncles, but Liam's eyes immediately locked onto a man in his late 30s, sitting to Winston's right. He had slicked back blonde hair and a smug, predatory smile. Snow. "Ah, the prodigal granddaughter and her phantom husband," Winston boomed, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. Come in. Let me look at the man who finally managed to put a ring on my stubborn Victoria." Victoria squeezed Liam's arm, a silent warning, and guided him to the chairs near Winston. "Grandfather," Victoria said, her tone softening into a warm, respectful register Liam had never heard before. "I'm so sorry we kept you waiting. Please meet Liam." Liam extended his hand. "An honor to meet you, Mr. Rhodes. Victoria has told me incredible things about you." Winston gripped Liam's hand, his handshake crushing, testing. Liam didn't flinch, holding the old man's gaze steadily. Winston's eyes narrowed slightly, searching Liam's face, before a booming laugh erupted from his chest. "Good grip. He's not one of those soft Wall Street boys you usually terrify, Victoria. I like him already. Sit." The dinner progressed through agonizingly long courses of caviar, roasted quail, and truffles. Liam played his part perfectly. He didn't try to sound like a billionaire. Instead, he leaned into his own grounded nature. When a board member asked him about his tech company, Liam effortlessly pivoted, talking about the importance of data integrity and ground-level logistics, things he actually understood deeply from his real job at Victoria's company. Victoria sat beside him, rigidly composed, but Liam noticed her glancing at him with a mix of surprise and relief. He wasn't fumbling. He wasn't intimidated by the billions of dollars sitting at the table. He was acting like a man who simply loved his wife and wasn't afraid of her family. But Snow wasn't convinced. Throughout the meal, Snow's eyes kept darting to Liam. There was a calculating, venomous look in his stare. As the dessert plates were cleared and the servants poured a 50-year-old port wine, Snow leaned forward, steepled his fingers, and smiled. "You know, Liam, it's fascinating," Snow began, his voice dripping with faux politeness. "Victoria says you run a boutique software firm, but you speak with such specific, granular knowledge of corporate logistics, almost like a mid-level data compliance analyst." The dining room went dead silent. Victoria stiffened, her hand freezing on her wine glass. Liam felt the blood drain from his face. "In fact," Snow continued, pulling his phone from his tuxedo pocket and tapping the screen deliberately. "As head of internal auditing, I was just reviewing the employee dossiers for Victoria's upcoming workforce reduction initiative, trying to find the fat to trim, as it were." Snow turned the phone screen around and placed it gently on the center of the table, pushing it toward Winston. "Imagine my absolute shock," Snow whispered, locking eyes with Liam, "when I saw a face that looked exactly like Victoria's new husband staring back at me from a cubicle on the 14th floor. The silence in the grand dining room was absolute, suffocating, and heavy enough to crack the antique crystal on the table. The rhythmic crashing of the Atlantic Ocean outside was the only sound that dared to interrupt the standoff. Victoria stared at the illuminated screen of Snow's phone. It was a standard corporate ID badge photo. Liam, wearing a cheap blue tie, looking exhausted against a grey backdrop. Below the photo read his title: Data Compliance Analyst 2, Employee number 40,921. The colour drained from Victoria's face. The empire she had bled for, the legacy she had sacrificed, every personal relationship to protect, was disintegrating before her eyes over a glass of 50-year-old port. She opened her mouth to speak, to fabricate a desperate lie, but her throat was completely dry. Winston Rhodes leaned forward, his massive hands gripping the edge of the mahogany table. His hawkish eyes darted from the phone to Victoria, and finally, to Liam. The old man's face was unreadable, a terrifying mask of calculating rage. "Victoria!" Winston rumbled, his voice low and dangerous. "Care to explain why my acting CEO has brought a mid-level desk jockey to my dinner table and introduced him as her husband?" Snow leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine. "She's desperate, grandfather. The board knows she's isolated. She hired a proxy to secure your shares. It's fraud, plain and simple. She is unfit to lead Sterling Rhodes." Liam felt the weight of his reality crashing down. If he walked away now, he would be fired, sued into oblivion, and Chloe's medical bills at Boston Children's Hospital would go unpaid. They would lose the apartment. They would lose everything. He looked at Victoria. The Ice Queen of Wall Street looked small, utterly defeated. Something snapped inside Liam. He wasn't just a prop. He was a father fighting for his daughter's life. Liam reached across the table, picked up Snow's phone, and let out a sharp, dismissive laugh. It was loud, confident, and completely out of place. The entire table flinched. "Snow," Liam said, shaking his head with a condescending smile. "I'm genuinely disappointed. Victoria warned me you were slow, but I thought it would take you at least until the weekend was over to access the dummy file." Snow's smug expression faltered. "What?" "Did you honestly believe," Liam said, his voice ringing with absolute authority, "that the acting CEO of $100 billion conglomerate would just randomly marry an independent tech developer from Geneva? Do you think Victoria is that careless?" Winston's eyes narrowed. "Speak plainly, boy." Liam stood up, buttoning his bespoke suit jacket. He paced slowly behind Victoria's chair, placing a protective, territorial hand on her shoulder. He felt her muscles trembling beneath the silk of her gown, but she straightened her posture immediately, playing along. 6 months ago, Victoria and I suspected a massive leak in the European Logistics Division. Liam lied smoothly, leaning entirely on the real, mundane spreadsheets he stared at for 60 hours a week. We couldn't bring in outside auditors like PricewaterhouseCoopers without tipping off the culprit. We needed someone on the inside, someone with full system access, placed at the lowest possible level so the executive tier wouldn't notice him. Liam locked eyes with Snow. So my brilliant wife created an alias for me. Employee 40,921. A ghost on the 14th floor. For 6 months, I have been sitting in a cubicle, quietly pulling the server logs that your division head thought were securely encrypted. Snow's face turned an ashen shade of grey. That's absurd. Grandfather, he's lying. Am I? Liam shot back, his voice turning lethal. He didn't need to lie anymore. He was reciting actual anomalies he had found and reported to his supervisor weeks ago. Anomalies he had been explicitly told to ignore. Let's talk about the Q3 shipping manifests for the Rotterdam port, Snow. Let's talk about the $14 million discrepancy, logged as transit depreciation. Or better yet, let's discuss the ghost consulting fees paid to a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands, authorized directly by your digital signature last Tuesday at 2:14 a.m. Gasps rippled around the table. The board members exchanged panicked, furious looks. I have the unredacted ledgers backed up on an offline server, Liam continued, stepping closer to Snow. I was going to present them to the board on Monday. But since you decided to hack into internal HR files to audit my wife's personal life, I figured we could just handle this over dessert. Snow sprang to his feet, his chair crashing backward onto the hardwood floor. He's a plant. Winston, she set me up. Winston Rhodes did not look at Snow. He did not look at Victoria. He stared at Liam, his ancient eyes burning with a terrifying intensity. The silence stretched for 10 agonizing seconds. Then, Winston slammed his fist onto the table. The silverware jumped. "Snow!" Winston roared, his voice shaking the crystal chandelier above them. "You will surrender your company phone and your security badges to my detail immediately. You will remain in the guest house, under guard, until my personal forensic team verifies these claims. If this boy is telling the truth, I will see you in federal prison before I let you bankrupt my family. Grandfather, please, get out of my sight," Winston bellowed. 2 of Winston's private security guards stepped out of the shadows, flanked Snow, and escorted him out of the dining room. The heavy doors clicked shut behind him. The remaining board members sat in stunned silence. Winston slowly turned his gaze back to Liam and Victoria. The old man reached for his glass of port, took a slow sip, and let out a deep, rumbling chuckle that echoed through the room. "Undercover on the 14th floor," Winston muttered, shaking his head. "Ruthless, paranoid, utterly deceptive." He looked at Victoria, a rare smile of genuine pride breaking across his weathered face. "You finally learned how to play the game, Victoria. I was wrong to doubt you. And you," Winston pointed a thick finger at Liam. "You have a spine made of tungsten, son. Welcome to the family." Victoria let out a breath she felt she had been holding for years. She reached up and placed her hand over Liam's, her grip tight, desperate, and overwhelmingly grateful. "Thank you, Grandfather," Victoria managed to say, her voice steady. "The shares are yours on Monday, Victoria," Winston said, waving his hand dismissively. "Now both of you, go away. I'm too old for this much adrenaline after dinner." The library was dark, save for the dying embers in the fireplace. Rain lashed against the massive window panes. Victoria stood by the glass, looking out at the black ocean. She had kicked off her heels, and the ironclad posture of the CEO was gone. She just looked tired. The heavy doors opened, and Liam walked in. He had loosened his tie and unbuttoned his collar. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a dull, throbbing exhaustion in its wake. "Snow's locked in the guest house," Liam said quietly, pouring 2 glasses of bourbon and walking over to her. He handed her one. "Your security team is outside." Victoria took the glass, her fingers brushing his. "How did you do that?" she whispered, staring into the amber liquid. "How did you know about Rotterdam?" "I wasn't entirely lying," Liam said, leaning against the window frame. "I really am employee 40,921. I process European logistics data. I found those discrepancies 3 weeks ago. I flagged them, but my manager told me to delete the report. He said Snow's division was untouchable." Victoria closed her eyes, a bitter smile touching her lips. "The rot was that deep. You didn't just save my inheritance tonight, Liam. You saved the entire company from a federal indictment. Snow was going to sink us." She opened her eyes and looked up at him. "But you took an impossible risk. If Snow hadn't panicked, if my grandfather had demanded to see the files right then, you would have gone to jail for fraud right alongside me." "I didn't have a choice," Liam said, his voice dropping. The bravado of the dining room was gone. "Why?" Victoria asked, her sharp eyes studying his face. "True told me you were desperate for the 50,000, but he wouldn't tell me why. What does a compliance analyst need with that kind of cash overnight?" Liam looked out at the storm. For the first time all evening, he felt truly vulnerable. 2 months ago, my daughter Chloe caught a severe respiratory virus. She was in the ICU at Boston Children's Hospital for 3 weeks. She's out now. But the out-of-network specialists, the respiratory therapy, my insurance barely covered half. The final notices came on Friday. They were going to garnish my wages. I was going to lose our apartment. Victoria went entirely still. The corporate titan, the woman who fired hundreds of people with a stroke of a pen, suddenly looked genuinely shaken. She stared at the platinum wedding band on Liam's finger. He hadn't fought Snow for greed or for a thrill. He had fought a billionaire in his own dining room because a little girl needed a roof over her head. "You did this. You walked into the lion's den. For your daughter," Victoria said softly. "I would burn this entire estate to the ground for her," Liam replied, turning to face her. "No offense." Victoria let out a quiet, genuine laugh. It was a beautiful sound, stripped of all its corporate armor. "None taken." She walked over to the heavy mahogany desk in the center of the room, opened a drawer, and pulled out a leather-bound checkbook. She grabbed a silver fountain pen and wrote furiously for a few seconds. She ripped the check out and walked back to Liam, pressing it into his hand. Liam looked down. The name on the check was his. The amount was not $50,000. It was $5 million. "Victoria, I can't. That is not a gift, Liam. That is a corporate bonus," Victoria said firmly, stepping into his space. "You just saved Sterling Rhodes from a $14 million embezzlement scandal and secured a 51% voting majority for the CEO. $5 million is a bargain. Pay off the hospital. Buy a house for Chloe. Put the rest in a trust." Liam stared at the zeros, his vision blurring. The crushing weight that had sat on his chest for 2 months, the fear, the sleepless nights, the panic of the collections agency, evaporated in an instant. He looked at Victoria, his chest heaving with emotion he couldn't hide. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means." "I'm not finished," Victoria said, a spark of the old, commanding CEO returning to her eyes. though this time it was laced with a strange warmth. Snow's division is gutted. My compliance department is clearly corrupt. On Monday morning, I am firing your manager, and then I am promoting employee 40,921 to Chief Compliance Officer, reporting directly to me. Liam blinked. Victoria, I'm a mid-level analyst. The board will never approve a jump like that. The board, Victoria said, stepping closer, believes you are my husband. They believe you are a ruthless undercover operative who dismantled snow roads over desert. They will approve whatever I tell them to. Liam let out a breathy laugh, shaking his head. So, the lie continues? Victoria looked up at him. The distance between them had closed entirely. The transactional nature of their meeting had vanished, replaced by a crackling, undeniable tension. They had fought a war together in 2 hours, and they had won. My grandfather is expecting us at the Hamptons estate in July for the summer gala, Victoria murmured, her blue eyes locked onto his. He's also expecting to meet the man who finally tamed me. It would be a catastrophic business decision to disappoint him. She reached out, her fingers gently adjusting the collar of his shirt. Besides, I think I'd very much like to meet Chloe, if you'll let me. Liam looked down at the woman who was supposed to be his boss, his fake wife, and a cold-hearted billionaire. Instead, he saw a brilliant, fierce partner who had just given his daughter her future back. He slowly reached up, his hand covering hers where it rested against his chest. He could feel his heart hammering against her palm. I think, Liam said softly, a genuine smile breaking across his face, Chloe would really like her new stepmother. What started as a desperate $50,000 lie turned into a multi-million-dollar corporate checkmate. Liam didn't just save his daughter's life, he won the respect and the heart of the most ruthless CEO on Wall Street. Do you think Victoria and Liam's real relationship will survive the brutal corporate world? Drop your thoughts in the comments, smash that like button, share this incredible story, and subscribe for more epic real-life dramas.